Yakim Shalom, Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, Bashem Rakak Radash, double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone for teachers of truth. Salutations to the sincere Akim and Aquas that may listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. May you be protected in these particular times, right? By Yahweh Bashem Yahushua. All right, so my name is Brother Requai. I'm back in here with another quick on Lord's will, as always, an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I kind of just wanted to add in a little bit to the live lesson of my elders that they were discussing essentially Philippians 2 and the character essentially of Yahweh Shai, right? And one of the main themes of that particular chapter was the theme of servitude, right? So what I wanted to do is just kind of like add in a couple more precepts, just kind of like add a little bit more to the lesson. I felt because it was a very enlightening lesson. I encourage you brothers and you sisters to check it out. And I kind of just wanted to add in a bit because this was a comment that was made in the live lesson in regards to the flesh is selfish, and I really thought about it last night as I was driving, and I'm like, that's actually very true. Because the flesh always wants to be essentially, comfortable. Wants to be at ease. It wants to be satisfied right now. It's very essentially, it's kind of like childish if you really think of it. Sometimes, sometimes it doesn't want to wait. Sometimes it doesn't want to go through any pain and anything like that. So, I kind of wanted to touch on that just a little bit, and I sincerely pray that this lesson will be edifying. So, without further ado, I don't want to ramble on too much. Let me jump across to, I always bring this one out, but okay, so this is Wisdom of Solomon 9:15, and it says, "For the corruptible body presseth down the soul, and the earthly tabernacle weigheth down the mind that museth upon many things," right? So, part of being in this flesh, these chains of darkness, there is essentially, it wants things, right now, and and actually most times it doesn't want to wait, right? Another thing is, being in this this dusty apartment that we're in, is that it wants right away. It just wants to be comforted, like essentially all the time, right? So, and that's part of that's a mentality that is essentially being what's the word looking thinking of, essentially being encouraged in society. When you really think of it, obey your thirst, just do it, not essentially thinking about the spiritual understanding or even the spiritual consequences of certain actions, right? So it's a let loose type of mindset, and there's essentially no restraint on anything, right? So the scriptures say that the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, right? So but through this understanding, we know that there's things that in our flesh, the flesh, it stops us wanting to do these things, but the spirit wants to be able to kind of continue and forge ahead, right? So um so that's really the lesson here. It's so the flesh essentially is selfish, and through going through, I guess, moments of essentially servitude, you learn that essentially what you have to do is kind of like subject yourself to another, right? And you have to think about the collective as a whole. So when we do, for example, like these lessons, for example, you're thinking about the elect being fed in these times, right? Getting that understanding, because that's what you really have to do. You have to like subject yourself to another, but not just through the lessons, through alms, through giving, through these different facets, and the Lord can put you in a particular situation, essentially, where essentially you are a subject unto one another, right? And the flesh, kind of just wants, why do you, there's a tug, and Paul talks about this essentially, in Romans 7. As a matter of fact, hold on. Let me go there real quick. See? If you heard that, the flesh wants to eat right now. Okay, let me see. Okay, this is Romans 7, verse 18, and it says, for I know that in me, that is my flesh, dwelleth no good thing, for to will is present with me, but how to perform that which is good, and I find not. In the NLT, it says, and I know that that nothing good lives in me, that is in my sinful nature. I want to do what is right, but I can't, right? So there's a conflict, there's a battle all the time, right? All right, and even like governing, our thoughts as well. There's always like a battle. You get wicked thoughts, and and then that and entertaining those thoughts can also even be a foothold for Satan to come and get in and then create, essentially division, essentially, causing these fruits of the flesh to essentially manifest, right? Malice and all this kinds of forth, envy and malice and all these different traits, right? But the point is that, through this conflict, applying a spiritual understanding, applying a spiritual, essentially applying a spiritual understanding is to be able to get through it and be able to understand like, oh, okay, this is why I'm in this situation, because this situation can help me, essentially it can round you out. And essentially what you're also doing is applying the character of Yahushua, because Yahushua did wash the disciples' feet, right? So I can get that later on. But the point is, in all these things, the Lord can essentially have favor upon us. So that's why you have to be spiritual when you're going through it, because in the moment, like, oh man, whatever the situation is, it may not feel good right now at the moment. But, if you're thinking, applying that spiritual understanding, and you think, man, this can actually help me, in times of Jacob's trouble, and the Lord can actually have divine protection over us in those times, right? Because we don't have anything to protect us. Right? And when I say that, I'm saying that in the physical, carnal sense, right? Let me get Hebrews 12 and 11, and it says, no chastening, excuse me, for no chastening, now no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous, but grievous. Nevertheless, afterward it yieldeth the peaceable fruit of righteousness to them that exercise thereby, right? So, going through these things, it helps to, and I'm speaking specifically about, this concept of servitude and, being, brotherly to one another. It helps you to essentially be, you apply Yahushua in these situations. That's why you have to be essentially going back, not to the lesson per se, but, going back to the main point. You have to have a spiritual understanding, right? You're applying that character, right? Because we're not saved by keeping all these different laws, right? Yes, like it said, pursuant to Romans 3, we establish the law, right? But we can't keep all of them 100%, in these bodies, in this captivity, right? So there has to be another benchmark, right, to be able to, for the Lord to have favor upon us. and then that is through applying Yahweh's character, right? So, going back to an early point I made, let me get. Okay, this is First Peter 4:7, and it says, "But the end of all things is at hand, and be ye therefore sober and watch unto prayer." Right, so we see these different calamities going on in the world. You have all these different hurricanes, and you have a lot of this information coming out about, essentially Esau kind of, manipulating the clouds and the weather and so on and so forth, and you know, ultimately, yes, it is the Lord, but I'm just saying, you have essentially all these scourges that are being brought onto America, right? These people have lost their entire houses, lost homes. They don't have drinking water. They don't have food. They don't have cat. They're not able to drive anywhere. They're stranded. There's a lot of spooky things going on in these times, right? We're living in very, very spooky times, right? So, with all these things going on, the helpful thing to do, is to, essentially seek the Lord while he may be found, right? Because, on top of these things, there's going to be spirits creative of vengeance. With all these different floods, you're going to have a displacement of different animals, animals being shifted around and all this kind of stuff. So what we need is essentially divine protection in those times, right? Scriptures talk about these are scourges that are being brought upon, and these scourges are essentially for amendment, to roughly paraphrase 2nd Ezra 16, right? So Jake doesn't consider these things until it's like right in their doorstep, right in their face, right? Until they actually see a scarcity essentially in the grocery stores, right? Jake doesn't consider these things until it's like knocking right at their door, right? So, and that's that part, and that plays into the comfort and the ease of this place, right? So, let me continue reading in this chapter here. It says, verse 8, and it says, "Above all things, have fervent charity amongst yourselves, for charity shall for charity shall cover a multitude of sins, and use hospitality one to another without grudging," right? So, these things, and that's why you have to be spiritual to be able to understand servitude, because, if you have some kind of substance and you're able to, kind of offer to help another, then that covers a multitude of sins, right? So you have to be. This is the kind of mindset and application you have to essentially embark on to be able, to the Lord's will. The Lord will have mercy upon us in those times, right? That's spiritual treasures you're storing up, right? Doing these things, right? And a good example, well, not a good example, but the opposite example is, and I normally bring this out in regards to Nabal, and Nabal essentially was the husband of Abigail, and he had the opportunity to be able to do good to the godly man, and he didn't do it. He didn't help King David in that moment, and the Lord took him out, right? So that's really the point. So you see the difference, between somebody who is able to actually help somebody, in these times, versus someone, who has a lot of substance, right? So really, Jake's mind is really what needs to be disinfected. It's not the fact that they have a lot of substance, a lot of riches, because when they have it, they don't understand a spiritual link of what to do with it when they do have it, when they do have some substance, right? I get this last one here. And again, this is kind of just tied, I guess, into like multiple different themes. The flesh is selfish, servitude, charity, in the midst of Jacob's trouble, being divinely protected. Excuse me. Right. bear with me on this. Okay, this is Acts 20, verse 29. I'm just going to read down to verse, what's that, verse 35. Okay, so Acts 20 and 29 says, For I know this, that after my departing shall grievous wolves enter among you, not sparing the flock. Also of your own selves shall men arise, speaking perverse things, to draw away disciples after them, right? So, that's things that we see, different camps, speaking different things. Like, for example, we're in a new covenant, you know, the Most High and Yahushua are the same person, and so on and so forth, right? So these are perverse things that are being spoken of in these times, right? Where was I? Verse 31, and it says, Therefore watch and remember that the space of 3 years I ceased not to warn everyone night and day with tears. And now, brethren, I command you to the Most High Yahweh, and to the grace of, and to the word of His grace, which you are able to build, which is able to build you up, and to give you an inheritance among all them which are sanctified. I have coveted no man's silver or gold or apparel. Yea, yea, ourselves know that these hands have ministered unto my necessities, and to them that were with me. I showed you all things, how that laboring ye ought to support the weak, and remember the words of our Lord Yahushua HaMashiach, how he said, it is more blessed than to give and to receive, right? So it just shows the mindset of the Apostle Paul, as his departure from Ephesus, that it's an admonishment, but the second thing is, the servitude as well, because he had to essentially minister, right, the word unto them, right, and actually be able to be and also be an example, right. So essentially, it's applying the character of Yahushua, right, and that's very, very important. He didn't take, he didn't charge for understanding like a lot of these different camps do, right, and that's that also goes by the title of the lesson, the flesh being selfish, because these guys, they're only thinking about themselves rather than actually thinking about the welfare of the flock, welfare of their own people. Like if your people are already in a destitute state of money and understanding, why are you going to charge them? But that shows them that their character is not of Yahushua, right? Anyways, I'll leave it there. I didn't want to make the lesson too long. I kind of just want to hit a couple points and jot down a couple precepts, but I sincerely pray that all this together made sense. But I'd like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. Till next time, I say Shalom.